All right. First rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So let's see. This one's probably gonna be a little bit dirty and fun because I just got done with it at 11 o'clock, and I'm just gonna go live right now and get it done. A couple things before we get into it. This is gonna be after waivers for what, like week 9 or 8 or whatever it is. Let's see. There's going to be a difference between guessing and being right, and guessing and being right with the idea that led you there. So, right. Sometimes it is better to be cute and get that upside, but if you're going to be chasing that upside and you're going to be cute, you're also going to get that downside too. Like when we get down to all that stuff that's going on out there. Like so, did get an earful from my co-managers for a lot of different reasons this week, and we'll kind of get into that real quick. And I will bring up this one to start first. So Aronde Gaston, like who could have saw this coming? I definitely wasn't me because I actually went back and listened to a couple of the past after waivers. Like yeah, should have already been picked up in all your competitive leagues. Like should have been like out there. And then again, like guessing right and being cute. Week 7, like against the Colts, it looked like there was gonna be a lot of scoring in that one, and there was. So like hopefully you got cute and you rolled him out there. One of my co-managers, I did say I wanted to roll him, but we had Kittle. That was a nice goose egg from Kittle. And Ferguson, we benched Ferguson for Kittle. We lost that week, if you're wondering, this last week because of this. And I wanted to get a trade done in that league because I was like, hey, we got these two tight ends who we're going to roll. And I was like, hey, I want to roll Gadsden. And he was like, no. The other league, which is the main competitive one, I wanted to roll Gadsden in that one. And he also said, like, no, don't get cute. So, like, that's how it goes sometime. And we lost both those games and both those leagues because sometimes you got to get cute, you got to chase that upside when it comes down to that one. So the other one, and I'll bring this up so anyway, Gadsden should already have been picked up in your more competitive leagues. He should have been rolled last week. That's how you go with that one. I'll get into a little bit more with him when I get to the Chargers. Bill, this is one of those things it looks like a good matchup, and you roll what you think is the right idea, and then you get a negative outcome. So sometimes being right is not necessarily, and I'll bring up Zach Charbonnet. He falls in the end zone on 1 yard touchdown run and a 2 yard touchdown run, and he's probably on a lot of people's benches because there's not a lot of getting cute to Zach Charbonnet. You're going to take a lot of your sub 40-degree days to get some of your 40-degree days when it comes down to it, and then you get a little bit of a spike like 18.5 points, and again your score studies may be a little bit different than mine, but that's how it goes sometimes. So if you get cute and you're just like, hey, it doesn't have enough upside and he's on my bench, you're going to miss that little bit that you can get out of some of these guys. I did see the comment about Matthew Golden, and I bring this up with Gadsden and Crosby Merritt, in what looked like a really good matchup, and Charbonnet, which is hey, I don't want to roll him out there because he doesn't have enough upside. Matthew Golden, when are you going to get these spike weeks? Well, you can kind of guess some of these games that are going to have higher implied point totals where you're going to get the right script. And there's two scripts that we like from a fantasy perspective. That's just a lot of scoring, whether they're throwing from behind because they're not good, or that they're in a shootout because both sides need to be a little bit of aggressive because both sides are going to be scoring. Those are the weeks that you want to be rolling those guys. So Matthew Golden, you matchup. Hey, that Lions game looks really good right now for the Packers. Now the Packers are not necessarily very good, or consistent, I should say. On the other hand, but those are the weeks you want to be rolling out there. That Baltimore week 17, week 16, maybe Chicago. You get one of those spike weeks in the right week with that guy, and there it goes. So you may be able to predict those weeks ahead of time. A lot of the other ones, and again, chasing touchdowns is a good way to win your league. It's also a good way to lose your league. A lot of the touchdowns are not going to be necessarily predictive, other than bulk going. Hey, the guy's usage is going to say, and I'll bring this one up so we can talk about this a little bit more with Tet. With Tet McMillan, one of those things is the high usage is going to say he's going to eventually fall in the end zone. Well, when is he going to fall in the end zone? I don't know, but math kind of works funny sometimes because then the 1 week that he doesn't get a more elite level amount of targets, he gets 2 red zone opportunities. He converts those into touchdowns. So sometimes just chasing overall bulk volume, that's kind of how my process is. You're going to eventually get those weeks, and I don't need to know how the sausage is made. 2 touchdown catches, that's going to be good enough for me most of the time. But I would like to get that massive 30-point week. Now, because of Ted, he may never have that this year. But other guys like Matthew Golden, he's only going to have a certain amount of weeks that are going to be what shall we say, fantasy relevant, where you're getting your ability to go out there and knife fight with anybody and win a week, like Gadsden at tight end. There's going to be a limited amount of those weeks that he's going to have. He puts it all together in 1 week. You get a 30-point week from a Matthew Golden. Now that may never happen because again, math works that way. He may do 1 for 8 and a touchdown. That's maybe what you get 1 week, and then the next week you may get like something like he did in week 6, where he goes like 5 for 3 for 86 and a couple carries, and he gives you like 11.7. Again, like your scoring setting may be different than mine. That's just kind of how fantasy works. So like you can matchup shop those guys. Hopefully you're not in the wrong situation where you have to be rolling these guys out there in your lineup on a week-to-week basis outside of like, say, that flex or wide receiver 3 or something like that, where you're just trying to catch the spike. You're just trying to go like, if I get a spike out of this guy this week, I will probably win my week. Now, we'll talk a little bit about like Christian McCaffrey, and I'll bring him up on this one so I can talk about him. Your Christian McCaffrey, like I had him in my less competitive league. He does 35.6. That's usually going to win you a week, except when everybody else in your lineup sucks. So that's just how it's going to go sometimes. Like, so if you're wondering about that. So to finish off with like your Jackson Darts, like I was also listening to some of the guys talk about like, well, who's the main waiver wire pickup? Is Jackson Dart? No, like if you're in a competitive league and you've been doing your job, the moment a guy that has the ability to score touchdowns on the ground and is going to have a certain amount of nimbly bimbly, like he should already be picked up. Like I don't know what less competitive leagues he's out there. And then when he goes out there in a predictive bench, like, you know, a Philadelphia, and he gives you a fantasy relevant week, like good enough to win you your week, like now he's set and forget. Now you're still going to get like downside because he's a rookie and he's going to have that down week. But you should know that when you're rolling them out there on a week-to-week basis, and then maybe you're in a position where you can matchup shop, and you know you can get like 5 touchdown passes from like a Jared Goff or like a Matt Stafford. You could take that chance. You could be cute because that's how you're going to win your fantasy weeks. Now it's going to cost you something, but again, like, are you in the business of coming in third place, or are you trying to win your league? When it comes down to it, now Henderson, I'll get into a little bit more down the line, but at this point, like you kind of painted yourself into a corner, and if you let him go, you're dropping a cuff. So like, you know, at that point, like the process is still right because you're going after a guy who can win your league, and now you're kind of in a bind. Now, are you ever going to get a spike week out of Travion Henderson at this point? Not without an injury, but that's how it goes. And then I already talked about like Zach Charbonnet. Like there's a certain amount of value to some of these guys that have to do with falling into the end zone, and then that's how it's going to go when you are right and you're patient. Because again, that's part of fantasy football, knowing that you're going to get certain guys are going to give you like 40-degree days or sub 40-degree days, and that's how it's going to go. So anyway, week 9 right now, you're looking at your bye weeks are going to be the Browns, the Jets, the Eagles, and the Buccaneers, and then defenses that I would be actively or proactively picking up ahead of time. Chargers and Titans, obviously going after the Titans at this point is probably not a bad idea. Broncos and Texans, and I have a lot to say about the Texans when we get to the Texans, but yeah, I'd be rolling the Broncos against the Texans. Texans may be a weekly roll at this point, like roll everything you can against them, because like that was pathetic. My co-manager doesn't know anything about football, was like, hey, you got to watch this because this is so bad, and I watched a little bit of it, and it's like horrible. So like San Francisco right now may be the number 1 streaming defense against like Houston in week 9. You know, this is like proactive, but like that would be reactive. That would be chasing the dragon if you're going to be doing that stuff. Jags and Raiders would be another one. Like the Raiders are like absolutely horrible, so the Jaguars would be like up to date and saying like, hey, like I should roll that. And Rams and Saints, Rams are just good, and Saints may not be necessarily the offense that I would be going after, but the Rams are going to be like one of the ones that can give a little bit more pressure up on defense. So all right, and then Ravens are not necessarily good on defense, but the Dolphins may be bad. But again, remember, like never trust Thursday Night Football if you can get away with it. All right. We'll start off with the 49ers news. Again, may not be as in-depth as other weeks because, I got done with this late and I'm trying to get out of here. So, forgive me on this stuff. So, no news on Purdy. What I did see on Twitter is the 49ers are going to be in no big hurry to bring him back if they keep winning games. That's the long and short of that one. And then I already talked about Christian McCaffrey, basically being like, Superman. That's why, take the risk to draft some of these guys because you're trying to win your league. That's how it's going to go. Like, not going to talk too much about that. I'm going to scroll down here, see what these guys are. Like, no news on Slick Rick right now. And again, this would be another one that, as long as they keep winning, I don't think they're in any necessarily big hurry to bring some of these guys back. Jennings was at 85% snaps in this game, and then Bourne was at 78% snaps. And again, they don't need that because the Falcons are probably going to be all over the place on offense this year. 81% snaps for Kittle, 2 targets. They didn't need it, because CMC put the team on his back and won the game. Now moving on to the Bears, and if you're wondering about this, first of all, this matchup against the Saints, remember the Saints have no incentive to make any game pretty. That's just how they're going to go. And we can move on to the running backs. I'm going to scroll down here right now. So Swift was at 54% snaps in this game. He had 7 red zone opportunities to Monongahela, who had 3 red zone opportunities. Remember, this game was kind of like not a blowout. When it comes down to it, that's literally what I wrote down, not a blowout against the Saints. if you're wondering about all that stuff. So like, yeah, now you're getting into that range of Monongahela is going to be like Charbonnet can fall in the end zone every, any given week when it comes down to it. Not necessarily as valuable as Charbonnet is, but if you're just going to be chasing after a guy that has the ability to fall in the end zone, because during bye weeks, a guy like Monongahela would be up there when it comes down to it. Now, wide receivers to talk about, Olamine Zazeus, whatever, 52% snaps. That's obviously down, but we didn't get the bump when it comes to Luther Burden at 28% snaps. Now, Cole Kmet back, and again, it says whatever is going on with his back at this point, he was down to 41% snaps. You did get the bump to Colston Loveland, 67% snaps. So if you miss out on other guys that we could be talking about today, yeah, you could be looking at like Colston Loveland, and that like Baltimore game, like week 8, could turn into a little bit of a shootout. So like getting cute on a Colston Loveland with all this stuff like 1 week stream or rental, yeah, it would be there. If you're going to be wondering about all that stuff, that would be in line with all that stuff that's going on out there. All right, Bengals on Thursday night. Remember, never trust Thursday night football. Long and short of Chase Brown, 63% snaps this game. He did look a little bit better in this one. 3 red zone went to him, 1 went to P. Ryan. I imagine that the breakdown, you see like 37% snaps, is going to stay somewhat consistent. And then all we're wondering about now, if you're like a Chase Brown owner or something like that, not Joe Burrow, is going to be, and I got to go to the Browns for Flacco, is if Flacco is going to necessarily like be good enough and get better as the offense goes on. And I imagine he is. So like that's going to make the long and short of all of your toys when it comes to the Bengals. Like going back to like why a guy like Jamar Chase is so valuable, and you see like 23 targets, 16 receptions, 161 and a touchdown. Like there are a certain amount of guys that can give you that spike. And, I've kind of changed my mind after what he did last year with some of these guys, like chasing the guys that have the massive amounts of upsides and building your roster a certain way. And, taking your Bobby Trees, the patron saint of fantasy football, and saying like, this is my rock, this is my boy. Like you can plant that guy in like your wide receiver too, like your Keenan Allen, something like that, and go like, hey, I have the ability to have a little bit of 40-degree day with my lineup, because now I got to put my hair down and I got to try and win this week. That's the gambling component of fantasy football when it comes down to that stuff. So as long as you can get that to be somewhat consistent with the Bengals, like they're going to have those guys that can do that. And that's why you spent on those guys. So there's your T. Higgins, 10 for 6 for 96 and a touchdown. And then Sivas is up there at 70% snaps. I think he did have a red zone in this game. And then where's he at? Gesicki going on IR with a pec. You did get equal and opposite reaction. Noah Fant up to 68% snaps in the game, 4 for 4 for 44 and a touchdown to go along with it. So again, chasing those matchups if you're in those deep enough leagues where you're trying to catch that spike. Not going to be the Jets. Maybe you're going to get the Bears. Maybe the Steelers. New England's going to get a little interesting. You got Baltimore, Buffalo, Baltimore. Like that's a nice stretch right there if you're going to be chasing like a Noah Fant and you're in your deep enough leagues that you don't get one of those upside tight ends that are going to be out there right now. And then Miami's going to be nice, but that Arizona game ain't going to be nice unless it's Jacoby Brissett at this point running the offense. All right, Bills, they were on bye. No news on Dalton Kincaid. I think that's about the only thing that I have on that one. Let's see, scrolling down, no news, and also no news on Josh Palmer and his ankle if you care about that because you're in like deep enough, dark enough leagues. So Broncos were able to come back on the Giants in this one if you're wondering about that stuff. So RJ Harvey sighting, only 25% snaps in this game, but he did 2 for 1 for 2 and a touchdown. And those are 2 red zone targets that he had. Dobbins had 2 red zone carries to go along with his overall usage was what like would be in line with what I would expect it to be overall. There's Dobbins at 49% snaps. And then Beatty, slight uptick being back from injury, 26% snaps in the game. He did have a red zone, but again, like they were trailing. That's why I imagine that you get the uptick. So I don't really care about that. Cortland Sutton did Cortland Sutton things, if you're wondering about that. Marvin Mims was 53% snaps, 7 for 6 for 85. Again, chasing that game flow, the game script, like Dallas would be there. Obviously like Houston, no, but like some of these games, if you're going to be chasing these deeper, darker guys. Now, the guy that I would bring up would be Troy Franklin. 62% snaps, 10 targets. He did have, I think, 4 red zone opportunities on top of that. He tugged on one of them. So like you talk about like the ability to get that spike week in that week that you can guess, like that Dallas game looks really good right now, potentially. And then just going down the line and saying like, hey, can I find another one? Maybe Jacksonville later on. But like as 1 week rental like Dallas, yeah, that would be like really interesting to me. And then Pat Bryant, the 3rd rounder, he was at 51%. That's relatively consistent overall. I think they all had red zone outside of Trey Franklin, from what I remember. I just didn't write it down because it wasn't that interesting. Evan Ingram, 56% snaps, 8 for 5 for 42. If you're going to be like dumpster diving on that stuff, like again, I think there are other potentially interesting tight ends that are available out there. Browns, I don't have a lot to say about the Browns because the game was so ugly. The Dolphins are bad, and then it was an ugly weather game when it comes down to it. So like Judkins, and I'll say this again, the perils of chasing like RB2s. Last week, he does 3.6 in that game against Pittsburgh, but then he falls in the end zone 3 times this week. So you get like, your spike week on top of that. So like, just remember what you got with guys and don't get cute on some of those guys. And then there's other guys you got to get cute on. Like those RB2s that are like very touchdown dependent. And if they're in your RB2 slot and you don't have like a potential bell cow, the high red zone opportunity and a good offense, you go with the receiving work. You just got to like realize that like those RB2s are going to go all over the place with their variance, and then they get the right week where they fall in the red zone a whole bunch of times, and then they look like an RB1 from the scoring perspective. Again, like that's just how it goes. Don't need to know how the sausage is made on top of that one, and then the other one with David Njoku, and there's no news on David Njoku that I saw last time I looked. It says day-to-day with knee, whatever that means. Harold Fannin did do 82% snaps, 5 for 4 for 36 in an ugly game that they didn't really need to do anything else on. All right, Buccaneers, first and foremost, no news on Bucky right now, and they are going into the bye after week 8 that's coming up here. So I imagine that you're going to get Bucky after the bye. I think that's what I wrote down in my notes. Did not write that down. Anyway, where's it at? Rachaad White was at 90% snaps, if you're wondering about that stuff going on. And then wide receiver room. So Mike Evans is probably done with the collarbone for fantasy this year. No news right now on Jalen McMillan in that neck because obviously they need wide receivers at this point. And I would imagine that he's going to come back week 10 if we're going to play that game with the bye weeks. Abuka did play. He was at 75% snaps. And I will say this, 157 air. So yeah, like he's the number one. He may not get some of the usage because he may be getting some of the deeper shots. So you might get a little bit more variance with him. It depends on how all these guys are going to shake out going on out down the line. Now I did see that Chris Godwin may not be playing anytime in the foreseeable future with whatever's going on with him. And then Sterling Shepard was at 64% snaps. I know the guy that you're probably wondering about is Tez Johnson right here. I did go look some of this stuff up if you're wondering. So 68% snaps, 9 for 4 for 58, 1 touchdown. He did have, where's he at? 100 air compared to Abuka's 157. His touchdown that he got was not a red zone opportunity because it was from 22 yards out, but it was a design screen that he got. So like just take that with a grain of salt. In the good direction in this case, that means that like they are dialing design plays up for guys. That's a good sign. If you're going to be chasing that stuff, probably not going to be New Orleans because that's going to be an ugly script game. And then you can start getting into like, or when are we going to get shootouts? Like, the Patriots look like a good offense. The Bills look like a good offense. The Rams look like a good offense. Maybe you're going to get that with Atlanta down the line. So like maybe you're going to get a certain amount of spike weeks if you're going to be in that spot where you need to be tracing like one of those wide receivers that are going to be out there, and then Cade Otton for the foreseeable future until we can kind of figure out what the usage is going to be on the rest of those wide receivers. Like, yeah, he's going to be like in that tight end one discussion, 97% snaps, 9 for 7 for 65. No red zone that I wrote down. So like again, like depends on what type of league you're in and what type of upside you're going to be looking at when you're going after your Cade Ottons in this case. So with the Cardinals, first and foremost, Jacoby Brissett, and this is going into the bye week. So the moment Kyler Murray comes back, you're downgrading your toys when it comes to the Cardinals because Jacoby Brissett's going to push the ball vertically down the field. The offense looked different the last couple of weeks. So, like, they're going to play slow and they're going to play ugly because sometimes they don't care about your fantasy lineup in this case. So, again, like, even if they're losing, it doesn't matter because, again, not a real football channel. Like, if they're trying to win games ugly and that's Kyler, that's not good from fantasy perspective. So this may be your shot during the bye week if you're going to get out from underneath like your Trey McBride, sell him like he's a unicorn. Let's see, where did I write down with him? Nothing on McBride. So he did have like, I think like 3 more red zone opportunities. He tugged on 2 of them, 13 targets. So like, yeah, you could probably sell high on that one if you want to get out from underneath it. There's some opportunities to go out and get some of those guys, with your Trey McBride, like that might be the opportunity, to do Trey McBride in a bag of chips to go get like a Ty Warren or something like that. If you're going to be doing that, same thing with your Marvin Harrison to get out from underneath him if you're worried about Kyler Murray coming back after the bye. bag of chips. That's probably all you're going to get from Marvin Harrison at this point. Now, running back room, I'll talk about like Dearness Johnson. I guess he came in and was doing like design or the dirty work back role that DeMercado was playing. So this makes it like really ugly to chase any of these guys. Michael Carter, he was at 37% snaps in this game. I got to scroll to the right spot. Run red zone carry went to him, but Bam Knight, he was at 45% snaps, 14 for 57, 4 for 3 for 7. He also had 2 red zone carries and 1 red zone target. He tugged on one of those. I guess he did not, because I thought I wrote it down that he did, but he did not. So anyway, that's what it says on Sleeper if you're wondering about that stuff. Moving on to the Chargers and playing from behind against the Colts. So again, like sometimes like it's not about guessing right from a fantasy perspective on how the actual game flow is going to go. It's just about like, well, is it look like one of those games where I can like roll toys and get a little cute on some of those guys? So like Chargers, you could say like are in somewhere in the ballpark of like okay to good offense, and the Colts are maybe one of the best offenses in the league at this point. So like one way or another, you're gonna get scoring to come out of this game. Now, remember when I talk about some of this stuff, 55 pass attempts when it comes to the Chargers and Justin Herbert, and it's like, well, how consistent is that going to be on a week-to-week basis? Chargers are probably going to be hucking about like 40 times a game. Again, it just depends on like how much of this. So some of the stuff when we talk about like the receivers, and we all want to talk about Gadsden here, like how consistent is the offense going to look? Well, they're probably not going to have a lot more 55 pass attempt games. You may get like 40 pass attempt games overall. Now, Haskins, he did leave the game with a hamstring, and it says sits out Tuesday's practice going on. And then Vidal, remember, like they were behind early in this game, 64% snaps overall with him. So that's all I really care about. If I'm going to be rolling him as some type of like RB2 or flex going forward right now in Minnesota, that's going to be like a very difficult game to predict overall. Titans may be a difficult week to predict overall. Then like if they get through the bye and Hampton's going to be back at that point, if you're wondering about like how many good weeks that you want to be rolling out, Kamani Valdell. When it comes down now, I don't have a lot to say about the wide receiver usage. You get 15 targets for Ladd, and then Keenan Allen was at 14 targets and get 55 pass attempts. Quentin Johnston, don't need to know how sausage was made. Only 6 targets, 2 receptions, did get a tug. And then Keandre Lambert-Smith, he was a healthy scratch. And then Trey Harris goes down from 83% snaps to 43% snaps. And again, remember, 55 pass attempts. They're out there like just hucking it all over the yard. Now, interesting thing enough, the blocking tight ends, well, it's not really interesting because when you think about like how the game script went, 0 for Tyler Conklin and 4% snaps for Will Disley. The actual blocker, 17% Tucker Fisk. So now we can set the stage to talk about like a Rondé Gadsden going 79% snaps, 9 for 7 for 164, and a touchdown in this one. Did see that he also had a drop from someplace, I think it was on Twitter. 89 air, which is like really good for a tight end, even on 9 targets. 2 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one of them. I did watch the highlights on this stuff. I will say keep your expectations very muted overall when it comes to like Gadsden. If you're gonna, and I did put a bid on him in my more competitive league. The red zone opportunity was more of a scramble. I think it was not designed, which is a better way to put it overall when it comes to that. And then a lot of the other stuff did not look like first read stuff. It was like, he's open. He's a good athlete, a good football player. But again, like remember the overall targets that went to everybody else. Now you're just going to be matchup shopping. Some of the touchdowns that he is going to likely get are going to be less than predictive, because like that's just how tight ends work and how fantasy works and football works. Like, there are likely going to be red zone opportunities. You're not always going to be able to predict which week those turns into touchdowns. What you can do is predict a certain amount of shootouts. And I already talked about this. Vikings game, maybe. Pittsburgh game, maybe. Jacksonville game, maybe. Jacksonville's been all over the place. Philadelphia, maybe. That Dallas game is looking really good in your semis. So that would be the game. Like if you're wondering about like getting some type of like spike week, the rest of them are probably going to be like less predictive. You probably are still going to get like top 10 tight ends. I already talked about this before. And then you're probably going to get a couple of touchdowns that may or may not be in those like top 10 finishes. So you may just get like 3 for 2 for like 6 and a touchdown on top of that. Like, it's all good stuff. Again, remember like how many guys out there are going to have at the tight end position are going to have the ability to like 25.9. I wouldn't have put him this far up there, but I would imagine like this would have been like close to the range of outcomes that he had. Unlike like Muth, I had no idea that Muth was going to do that. Now, Kansas City, I'll just say real quick, Nobody should be surprised that Rashee Rice went out there, and I got to scroll down here. 4 red zone opportunities, 2 tugs, 10 for 7 for 42. That's what we thought was going to happen with him. Yeah, that's the long and short of that. No red zone went to Kelsey. Overall in the game, I don't care about the rest of the wide receivers at this point when it comes to the Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco, he was at 56% snaps in this game, 2 red zone opportunities in this one. He tugged on one of them. A little bit interesting, Brashad Smith, he was at 35% snaps, 14 for 39, 5 for 5 for 42. He did get first drive usage, but, and here's your but, he did also close the game out. So he did 6 red zone carries, 1 red zone target. 4 red zone carries came late in the fourth quarter after a Raiders fumble in the red zone. There you go. On all that stuff going on. Now, what makes it a little bit more interesting is you get 19% snaps to Kareem Hunt. So it does appear that like he has moved into that like running back 2 role for the Chiefs. So probably going to have a certain amount of value going back to like Jarrett McKinnon role where you're going to get like just tugs coming out of him. So he is probably like, I would not necessarily say like a desperation RB2, but he's going to definitely be like a boom bust, like weekly role. It is getting to that point where I will just say that. That's where I think he's at. Now, Colts, I may not have anything to talk about them. Oh, yeah, I do have stuff to talk about with the Colts when it comes to the wide receiver room. Like, they're all league winners. You're looking at, like, Danny Dimes, league winner. JT is going to be a league winner. Pittman's a league winner. And Ty Warren's a league winner. Again, like, chasing prices for offenses that are expected to be bad, and then they end up being good. And I've always talked about that. So, no need to beat a dead horse. Josh Downs, he was out with a concussion in this one. You did get A.D. Mitchell. If you're your dynasty leagues, he was at 8% snaps. Doolin was out with a chest, and then Anthony Gould, whatever, he jumped up to 65% snaps. So like in this offense, if something is going to work out that way, if he's the 1-1 replacement for Josh Downs, and you're in like those 60-man vampire leagues, yeah, you could throw him out there and expect that you're going to get lucky. And again, like chasing pieces of good offenses. In the right script type games in the Charger game, like, too goodish type offenses, 87% snaps, 10 for 5 for 98. So yeah, like probably does not change my opinion of him going back to like last year and the year before that. Like you're just going to have the ability to get, a a 40-degree day from a guy that is probably going to be on your waiver wire on any given week. Now, because he's attached to this offense, and this offense is maybe the best in football right now, you could slightly upgrade him from being on the waiver wire and just throwing him out there when you need a guy to fill in to a guy that you may want to think about like not wanting to see on a week-to-week basis in your opponent's lineup. All right. Redskins, absolute mess against the Cowboys. Real quick, so I'll talk about the wide receivers because like this is one of those ones where we can talk about like with Bill. I'll bring up Bill first. 49% snaps, 13 for 33, 2 for 1 for -1 in the passing game. He got a red zone. McNichols got a red zone, and C-Rod vultured a red zone late in the game overall on his 13% snaps. If you're wondering, and then McNichols is at 36% snaps in this game, and they were mostly from behind in this one. Jalen Daniels is out with a hamstring, whatever. Who knows what's going to go on with that? Mariota would downgrade everybody, but like he would upgrade himself into streamability because of the Nimbly Bimbly. If you're wondering about that, a lot of this is going to come down to the wide receivers. So you got like McLaurin. I don't know if you want to believe that. Expected to practice is what it says on Sleeper right now. Debo was out with a heel, and then you got like Noah Brown on IR. So like your starting wide receivers at this point are going to be Chris Moore, 79% snaps, and then I do think you got like Jalen Lane was up to 69% snaps. He's like a speed slot guy. Overall, I gave you can kind of get the idea at this point, like why we could talk about like being cute in a game that we're like, oh, the Cowboys are totally bad. Well, the Redskins don't have any wide receivers, and the Cowboys can just go like, we dare you to throw the football at that point. That's how I imagine it would go at this point. And then Zach Ertz did get you home because we can talk about like him being a unicorn in this offense. 7 targets. You don't need to know how the sausage made. He red zone tugged overall in this one. All right. Cowboys, and not a lot to talk about with them. Javonte was at 85% snaps. They look like, I went and looked at like the game log, and it looked like they were running up the score late because like Dak was in the game. Javonte was still in the game, like I think with like 7 minutes left to go. They were up by like 3 scores or something like that. Most of this Jaden Blue stuff, 22% snaps overall. Finished the game off late. That's how he got there, if you're wondering about that. And then the only other thing I really have to talk about, like other than like you're rolling CD Lamb, obviously, and you're just rolling Pickens at this point. Rest of the season, you're not overthinking it. I did talk about this with Jake Ferguson, and this is what I was arguing with my co-manager about. Red zone opportunities are likely going to stay consistent with him. 3 red zone opportunities. He tugged on 2 of them. Yeah, that's just how it goes. Like, and that's what tight ends do. You're chasing those tugs. So if you're wondering about all that stuff, and CD Lamb coming back with Pickens, Ferguson's role in the offense didn't necessarily change as red zone target guy. All right, Dolphins, and I don't think I have like hardly anything to say about them because this was an ugly, rainy game, and the Dolphins are not designed to play in any type of ugly, rainy game overall. Nick Westbrook-Akine, if you're going to be chasing some of these guys, he was up to 76% snaps. That's not surprising in this one. And then the other one, Darren Waller right now is out with a pec, and I guess like, not bad enough to go on IR when it comes down to that. Now, hopefully you didn't listen to me, and you rolled Gadsden this week instead of like Darren Waller at this point. The question about guys like Darren Waller, and I'll bring up Darren Waller so you can stare at him instead of listening to me. Guys like Darren Waller, like chasing the high efficiency, touchdown rate, stuff like that. That's nonsense. Don't listen to the guys that talk about those stuff. Yes, that stuff tends to return to quote unquote the mean. But if the guy is being used as red zone opportunity guy attached to an okay offense, there's going to be red zone opportunities. And the way that math tends to function is, yes, not all of them will land. But from a fantasy football perspective, I hate to break this to everybody out there, but like sometimes they all land, and that's just how it goes sometimes. So like if you're getting a guy who is projected to be the number 2 in an offense, the offense is going to be in like that okay area, and he's going to get red zone opportunities. I would not necessarily play with that, expect that to regress. Now, at this point, and that's why like there may be a certain amount more value to Waller before the injury than after the injury, obviously. So we're talking about like before the injury, going after certain guys that are going to have higher ceilings versus like getting safe and trying to chase the guys that are getting a certain amount of opportunity. Again, tight ends that get used like vertically in the passing game and have red zone opportunity, and they're going to be the number 1 and number 2 in the offense. That's what you're generally looking for. And is the offense good enough, i.e. the quarterback play, and we're looking at the Texans and say like the offensive line and the blocking to allow the guys to do that on a week-to-week basis. That's all I'm generally looking for from fantasy perspective, and I do have to get a little cute and try and manufacture that, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to find my positional advantage. And those guys, like you're talking about, like your Zach Ertz and stuff like that, those guys are just gonna be on the wire, and you're constantly trying to get lucky that you're going to get red zone. And unless they're getting a majority of red zone like Ferguson, you're just not going to get that. That's just how it works. So moving on to the Eagles, and I don't think I have anything written down in this one, and this was a pretty good game overall. Again, roll out your best guys, and because if you were worried about like, I can't predict this guy, I shouldn't be rolling him, and if they're in those slots, like they're wide receiver 1 or something like that, I can understand that. But like some of these guys, like 11 for 9 for 183, a touchdown, that guy, like luckily, I mean, I lost anyway, but that was on a guy's bench that I played this week. Again, like just know what are you trying to get from the guy when you drafted him, and what's on your lineup and stuff like that. So that's how I would look at that. And I don't think I have anything else to talk about this going forward. I want to check. I think Esteme went to the Saints, so I will bring that up later. All right. Falcons, already talked about the fact that like they're probably going to be very unpredictable all season long. Wide receiver room, Ray McLeod was released by them overall, and that's about like all I have written down when it comes down to that. Let's see, Giants. Let's see, go to them. First and foremost, like Jackson Dart, if you're in competitive league, he should have already been picked up. The goal line fullback stuff. He did vulture touchdown late in the game. Let's see, Scattaboo, he had all the red zone opportunity in this one, if you're wondering about that, on his 60% snaps. And then Tyrone Tracy, 36% snaps, he ripped off a 31-yarder. That's how he got home. So like you're going to lose a certain amount, and I'll talk about this, like Scattaboo, where is it, week 6, he vultured 3 touchdowns basically away from Jackson Dart. And then because he's going to lose out on like 60, or I shouldn't say 60, somewhere probably between like 40 to 20% of the snaps are going to go to Singletary, and even though Singletary was down to 4% snaps, and Tracy, some of that work is going to go to somebody else. And like sometimes you can lose a little bit of that, and it's just going to be gravy, and then sometimes it's going to be a 31-yard touchdown that did not go to your guy. Let's see. Theo Johnson was at 94% snaps. He did tug in this game. Don't need to know how the sausage was made. I guess it was tipped. And then there's my boy Daniel Bellinger, 4 for 3 for 88 and a touchdown. On top of that, so it does look like they're going to be rolling a lot of 2 tight ends in this one. And then if you're wondering about like patting yourself on the back, Wandale, 91% stuff, 12 for 6 for 95. That offense does look a lot more fun with Jackson Dart. Jaguars London game. So remember, this is a variable, and I did go watch some of this. So running back usage remained consistent between ETN and Tootin and LaQuint Allen. So that's the long and short on that one. And again, they only scored 7 points, and they were behind for most of the game. Brian Thomas right now, let's see, shoulder injury. He did leave 66% snaps. So just remember that when we get into your Travis Hunter. So Travis Hunter, 87% snaps, 14 for 8, 101, and a touchdown. 48 pass attempts in this game to begin with. And some of the targets that he got later in the game was when Thomas was already out of the game. Some of the usage that I saw with him was good usage, is sustainable stuff, and some of it was not necessarily what I would say that is the type of stuff that I want to see and go like I'm going to get. So like the gravy stuff, that's fine, but you did get some usage, or you did get some like more design stuff that was going to him overall. So I do think that he has week to week value at this point. I just don't know if you're necessarily going to get league winner, and I think the offense is going to be all over the place, inconsistent. Even like if Thomas is going to miss any time, and we should talk about like the bye week that's looming, after that, like it's going to be like very difficult to be able to predict your Travis Hunter at that point. De'Ami Brown was down to 30% snaps in this game. And I didn't see anything about injury. Equal and opposite reaction, Parker Washington, 88% snaps. And I really like Parker Washington, like 10 targets overall. So like this is probably more of a dynasty thing. Hopefully you guys can hear that train. Jets, this is one of the ones that like I'll just talk about. Like I probably don't care anything about the Jets right now. So like maybe Justin Fields, maybe not Justin Fields, maybe concussion, who knows. When it comes down to it, would be more interested in rolling guys out there right now with Tyron Taylor. And again, like sometimes you got to be cute, chase that upside, and then when the wheels come off, like if they're going to be benching him, that's just how it's going to go. That's fantasy. You got to take your shots to win your league. Now, 2 things with Brees. I guess maybe he rolled an ankle, and I guess maybe he's going to get traded. And you can see right there, like 11 hours ago, trade deadline. So with Braylon Allen maybe missing a lot of time, probably even in your less competitive leagues, especially like with your kicker slots out there, like would be picking up Isaiah Davis, trying to figure out what's going to go on. Even if it's a bad offense, there's just not a lot of guys left if Brees gets traded at that point. That's how I would look at that overall. If you're wondering about chasing the wide receivers, Josh Reynolds was at 95% snaps, and then the rookie Arian Smith was at 92% snaps. Maybe the only guy I'm a little bit interested in at this point is going to be like Mason Taylor, because he's a tight end. And again, there's a lot of other tight ends that I would rather be chasing. 93% snaps, 9 for 3 for 31. And that's a big if, it ends up being like Tyrod Taylor. I don't think Aaron Glenn is necessarily coaching the team well. It does appear, surprise, surprise, that the Jets are a mess. Lions, not a lot to talk about with the Lions. Let's see where they're at right here. The only thing we're really tracking on is Tesla. He was down 13% snaps, and it does look like Raymond is healthy again. He was up to 44% snaps. Overall in the game, let's see, scrolling down here to the Packers. So one real quick caveat, even though on paper, Josh Jacobs falls in the end zone twice, he had a calf and an injury or an illness. And I guess the illness was not the problem. It was the calf. So like I can maybe see in this game, the 55% snaps overall, and you get the uptick with the Emmanuel Wilson, and that's going to be because of the calf overall. So that's maybe something to be monitoring. Guy in my more competitive league did pick up Emmanuel Sanders, like good move overall, as the guy that would get a certain amount of usage if Jacobs was inactive in the game. Wide receivers, so you did get 73% snaps to Golden. There was a couple of manufacturer stuff early, or just short stuff to him early on in the game, and then you got a 17-yard late. So that would, my idea behind Matthew Golden is like matchup shop, and again, you got to pick the right week. Maybe you get Pittsburgh. They did look like they got in a little bit of scoring festival against the Bengals. The Eagles could turn to that. Like, who knows what's going to go on with the Giants at this point, and Minnesota, who knows? That may be dependent on J.J. McCarthy. Definitely Detroit. Maybe the Bears again. and then Bears week 17 and this Baltimore game. I imagine you're going to get like a Gadsden type week from Matthew Golden. It's going to be very difficult to say like it will happen, especially because we're going to be monitoring the rest of the wide receivers. But like I think it's still going to be there. If you're going to be like matchup shopping, that's going to be out there. And then Wicks did leave with a calf. Dobbs was at 89% snaps in the game overall, and then we're just kind of waiting on Christian Watson news overall. That's what I have written down. Let's see. Panthers. So this probably upgrades your Panthers shares right now. So Bryce Young, he did leave with the dreaded high ankle. This Buffalo game may be a little bit more passing again, like for the Panthers, not necessarily for the Packers. Bryce Young or the Panthers could get into a little bit of scoring against the next two games with the Buffalo Bills and the Packers and the Red Rifle. And the Red Rifle has upgraded the offense for the Packers or the Panthers in the past, and you can see like week 3 Vegas, like he just goes out there and lights it up. So this would be another one like your Jake Brown. He's like predictive bench. He's gonna go out there and be like top 5 fantasy guy, which means you're gonna drag toys with him, and then like your predictive starts, he's gonna like give you 4.7 right there against the Bears. So if you're gonna be chasing those guys on now, I did watch this in the ticker because I did roll Rico Dowdle. They were literally splitting with each other, him and Chuba Hubbard, series by series. That's how the breakdown went overall. So I think it went 2 red zone for Rico, 1 red zone for Chuba, but it didn't really matter because it was just what was going on with each individual drive on that one. Wide receivers, Tet was at 87%, snaps, 5 for 3 for 33. Leggett was at 80% snaps in this one, 11 for 9 for 92, and a touchdown. He did have 2 red zone opportunities again on that one. So like that is a little interesting to me, especially if we're going to get certain games where like maybe wink, wink, nudge, nudge, there's going to be a little bit more scoring or at least negative scripts where it comes to the Panthers overall. So like limited amount of guys that are likely going to be on your wire when it comes to like Leggett. If you're going to be going after chasing that, I imagine like you're probably going to get bounced back from Tet before you get another like Leggett type week like this. Tight end, or then one more thing with your our boy Jalen Coker was back at 37% snaps in this game, and then I haven't been talking about this because I keep forgetting. Jimmy Horn, who's a camp hype guy, rookie out of Colorado, relatively consistent week 5 to week 7, 27% snaps, 21% snaps, 21% snaps. So like that's what it looks like going down the line. Now, Jatavion Sanders was back 37% snaps. He did have a red zone opportunity, but you also had red zone opportunities, I think, Tremble did not have a red zone opportunity at 66% snaps. He led everybody. Mitchell Evans, 5th rounder, he was at 44% snaps, relatively consistent. He did have a red zone opportunity. All right, Patriots. So what I will say about the Patriots before I talk about the running backs is the wide receiver usage remained relatively consistent. You can see like 54% snaps when it comes to Stephon Diggs. They all seem like they have their role within the offense. So even if you're going to be chasing like Boutte, he's just doing like vertical routes out of the X position is what I've been able to gather that's going on. So like everybody else, like Pop Douglas is relatively consistent. Matt Collins is going to stay consistent within the offense. Even, where's he at? Kyle Williams, 18% snaps. So like everybody is consistent overall with how they're being used in the offense, including the tight ends. The one thing we can talk about now with is the running back room. So Ramondre at 75% snaps in this game, 4 red zone carries, 1 red zone target. He tugged on the red zone carry. Henderson is down to 14% snaps in this one. So this is a pretty good indication of how they feel. And again, my thoughts on this is like, if you let a potential league-winning cuff go onto the wire, you're going to have to night fight for it back. So at this point, you're probably just kind of stuck with that. Maybe if you're in competitive enough leagues and you just want to be done with the problem, you can throw him in as a bag of chips and just get the roster spot back in another trade. Like he's going to have cuff value. Offense is pretty good overall, but I just don't know. Like, yeah, at this point, like it does appear that it's over. I will just say that instead of trying to cope my way out of that. All right. Raiders, I don't care about the Raiders. They are going into a bye. They were really bad. So the main news is Brock Bowers is supposed to be back after the bye. I don't think it matters because the offense is bad. Michael Mayer, 94% snaps again. It's not about being right sometimes. It's about the process that gets you there. So like 94% snaps, yeah, if the offense wasn't so bad overall. So again, like, is there a chance at a spike? Well, you also got like the unicorn and Brock Bowers being out, and then Jacoby Myers was also out. And I guess he's pushing for that trade. And I guess it may be like maybe the Giants or something like that that's going to go on with all that stuff if you're going to be speculating. So with Myers out, you get 86% snaps going to Deontay Thornton. Trey Tucker remains consistent, 89% snaps, and then Beck was up to 63. This is more of a dynasty thing. If you're wondering about that, all right, Rams. So they blew out the Jags in London, and this is one of the other ones where I was looking at the box score because I was like, how are the Rams beating the Jags the way they are? There's like no yardage overall in this game. Devontae Adams does 3 touchdown catches. They're going on bye. Supposedly, maybe you're going to get Puka back after the bye. That's about it. So lower snap share when it comes to like your Whittington, 60% snaps. It's because they blew him out overall. He was another one that I was trying to get my co-managers to let me roll. As being cute, did not get my way on that one, which is good. Did not get my way on Gadsden, which is bad. That's what, if you guys haven't realized, like part of what my co-managers do is prevent me from just being the smartest guy in the room all the time. When it comes down to it now. Ferguson, 49% snaps, 3 for 1 for 31. He did get loose on a touchdown on a 31-yarder. Higbee, 37% snaps. I wouldn't necessarily take any of that the wrong way or the right way because of they were blowing him out overall, and that includes like this slight uptick when it comes to Blake Corum late in the game overall. All right, let's see who's next. Ravens. So right now, and this was one of the interesting things. No. Lamar Jackson coming out of the bye right now, still sidelined. It says it's a day ago with the hamstring, so that's something to be monitoring coming out of the bye. So after that, like I don't care. I wouldn't be touching anything, including King Henry if Lamar Jackson's back or not back. So Saints, Kendre Miller, I guess 4% snaps, first carry of the game that he got, goes down with an ACL. He goes on IR. Everybody's talking about like the potential you're going to get Devin Neal. This would be more like handcuff attached to like not a good offense at that point. If you're going to get anything, maybe you're going to get an uptick to see down the line with them. Remember, like Kamara said that he's basically going to retire before he goes and plays for somebody else. So you're probably not going to get a trade when it comes to Kamara. This is like pure cuff. Maybe they'll shut down Kamara late in the season and you'll get like a little bit of Devin Neal. Maybe I could see that occurring if you want to be chasing any of that stuff. Now, the other thing when it comes to like overall usage, and I talked about this like early in the season, their offense is not going to be good. But the higher air yards, even if they weren't landing overall in the offense, if you get cute with some of these guys that you're like, well, they're just not going to do it for me, you're going to miss out on the spike. So hopefully he was in your lineup when he did like the 2 touchdown catches on top of that. Like this is how it's going to go. Shaheed did get the slight uptick down from 61% snaps up to 77. A little bit of Juwan Johnson. Spencer Rattler is probably a little bit better than it was advertised. I will just say that real quick. So you may be able to just pull Juwan Johnson off your waiver wire and roll him on any given week. You can see like 71% stuff, 7 for 5 for 79. It's again, ugly guys that I probably would not be chasing with your roster if I was trying to win my league. All right. Seattle's up next, and I'll just say like this is the game. Like I had to go watch this because this was like stupid, ugly game by both the Panthers or the Texans and the Seahawks in this game overall. So Kenneth Walker, 44% snaps. He did do 2 red zone opportunities on top of that. But again, I'll explain this. 51% snaps with Charbonnet, 2 red zone opportunities. He tugged on his 2 red zone opportunities. He also had a red zone target. Charbonnet's 2 red zone opportunities came from the 1-yard line and the 2-yard line. So that gives you an indication that like when they get to the goal line, it's Zach Charbonnet, and Kenneth Walker probably has to score outside of like, say, like the 5-yard line at that point. So like, your upside, your ability to win a week is still going to be Kenneth Walker, and your 40-degree day is going to be Zach Charbonnet. It just so happened he got 2 touchdowns on the same week. Now, JSN is still a league winner. I was seeing that like his target share is like 45%. Opportunity funnel attached to an okay offense. That's what you want. And that's your league winner. And then if you have like not bad coaching like the Texans, they'll figure out a way to get the guy the football when everybody in the stands the stadiums know that it's going to JSN at 45% target rate. And he still is able to do 14 for 8, 123 and a touchdown on a post because the coaches are bad. And then a little bit of an uptick when it comes to usage on Elijah Arroyo, and it's not going to pop up right now because it doesn't like me, and that's just how Sleeper's going to function. It's probably going to be the rest of the time here. Elijah Arroyo, he did fumble in the game, 38% snaps. He did go like 4 for 4 overall in the game. Let's see if this one will work now. And Sleeper may be down, which is awesome as I try and get this done. All right. So I'll see if I can finish this off by my notes. We'll move over to the Steelers. So Jalen Warren in this one, both red zone opportunities went to him. He was at 65% snaps. Gainwell did the rest of the work. Caleb Johnson was zeroed in this game overall. Calvin Austin was out with a shoulder, so you did get an uptick to Roman Wilson was at 58% snaps. When it comes to the tight ends, and I had no idea Muth was going to do like, what was it? 2 touchdowns, 110 on 6 for 5 or something like that. 2 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one. Joni was at 70% snaps, 2 red zone opportunity in this game. He tugged on one. Washington was at 63% snaps, 3 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one. Connor Hayward right here. He did 10% snaps. He got a red zone opportunity on top of that in the game also. So, like, I did see the betting slip on Twitter. Someone bet all 3 tight ends were going to get touchdowns, and they paid out on that one just to give them an idea. Did talk about the Texans right here, if it will pull up anytime soon. Still not going to pull up. And now Sleeper is playing games. And I'm really concerned. My internet is down, which is okay because I am recording on OBS, so I can finish this out. So, when it comes to the Texans, and I watched the tape on the Texans, and you guys can look at this right now, is they can't block anybody. They can't design anything. They're dropping footballs, and they're playing the wrong guys right now. That's what I'll say the long and short of that one. So Nick Chubb was at 25% snaps. They were basically behind. I think it was like 17-3 at one point in the first half. Chubb 25% snaps. He did have a red zone target. Woody Marks, remember they're playing from behind. He was at 73 or 63% snaps. 2 red zone carries, 2 red zone targets. He tugged on one of them, so that's probably the guy that I want. If this remains consistent, remember this is because of the script overall. Nico Collins got knocked out of the game with a concussion. Christian Kirk was out with a hamstring. Xavier Hutchinson, he's jumped up to 78% snaps overall in the game. Higgins was at 63% snaps. Noel was at 43% snaps. He was like 4 for 4 for 70 overall. I guess like if there's a guy that I'm going to be chasing, it would be Noel at this point. I don't want any of those. They're playing Braxton Berrios for some reason at 47% snaps. That's just ridiculous. It doesn't matter. And again, they can't block anybody to begin with. They can't scheme anything up. Like my co-manager who doesn't watch or doesn't really know anything about football was complaining about how bad the Texans were playing because we needed like 10 points from Nico. So he made me watch the game and I was like, this is horrible. This is not real football. Schultz had 10 targets overall. So again, like outside of maybe Noel and Schultz, especially if you're going to get like Nico being out this week, maybe you could go chase Higgins if you want to. There are vacated targets there. It's just really bad. I don't know how much I want to be touching on any of that stuff. Titans. Pollard was at 57% snaps in this game. And I think my internet may be back at this point. We can see overall in this one. So with Pollard was at 57% snaps. Spears was at 53% snaps. Overall, I would not be touching the Titans right here. We can go back to them. I would not be touching the Titans right now. There's going to be another bad offense overall. I didn't write down any red zone opportunity because there wasn't any red zone opportunity when it comes to your running backs. So maybe you're going to get a certain amount of spike out of Tajay Spears if you're going to be rolling the guy that's going to have the potential higher upside, especially in that Colts game that's going to be coming out with the Chargers. There may be a little bit there. I don't know how much I really want to be playing with that outside of like desperation. A.O. Minor was at 96% snaps in this game. So again, like that was the right logic. Probably the wrong guy because Deke or DK or whatever his name is, Dyke, 57% snaps, 4 for 4 for 70 and a touchdown. And then you got like Van Jefferson running at 85% snaps in the game. Tyler Lockett was released by the Titans at this point. He can go someplace else. And then if we're tracking the tight ends, and I'm probably not at this point, Chig was at 60% snaps, and Gunnar Helm was at 53% snaps. Again, I do like Ward. I keep watching his tape because I think there's some specialness there. It's just not going to probably happen this year overall. All right, first and foremost with the Vikings, so I can get out of here. JJ McCarthy says like right now, like week 9 scheduled to return. So if you're going to be chasing that overall. And then the other thing to be looking at with them would be Aaron Jones. Limited in practice 7 hours ago with a hamstring. Supposed to be coming back on that one. And yeah, and the only other thing I would necessarily even talk about a potential touchdown that didn't go to TJ Hawkinson and with your Jordan Addison, again, like know what you got overall with these guys, like 93% stuff, 12 for 9 for 128 if you're chasing that stuff. So anyway, that's about what I got for your after waivers, and hopefully I will be back next week.